Chapter 6. The Way to Stop Communism. It had its beginning in Munich, said my friend Herr Kessler, the one-time Catholic from Bavaria's neighboring state of Württemberg in southern Germany. In the most artistic, cultivated, and Catholic city in Germany, the city of art and of song and of love, and Gemütlichkeit. The only city in Germany that all foreign tourists always insisted on visiting. There it had its beginning, a purely local affair, without any philosophy. Nobody outside paid any attention to it. Only after it spread and took root, Bavarians asked, "Who is Hitler? What is this party with the fancy name? What is behind it?" Hitler was a simple soldier, like millions of others. Only he had a feeling for masses of people, and he could speak with passion. The people didn't pay any attention to the party programs as such. They went to the meetings just to hear something new, anything new. They were desperate about the economic situation, and New Germany sounded good to them, but from a deep or broad point of view, they saw nothing at all. Hitler talked always against the government, against the lost war, against the peace treaty, against unemployment. All that people liked. By the time the intellectuals asked, "What is this?" it had a solid basis in the common people. It was the Arbiter Socialist Party, the party of workers controlling the social order. It was not for intellectuals. The situation in Germany got worse and worse. What lay underneath people's daily lives, the real root, was gone. Look at the suicides. Look at the immorality. People wanted something radical, a real change. This want took the form more and more of communism, especially in Middle Germany, in the industrial area, and in the cities of the north. That was no invention of Hitler. That was real. In countries like America, there is no communism because there is no desire for radical change. Hitlerism had to answer communism with something just as radical. Communism always used force. Hitlerism answered it with force. The really absolute enemy of communism, always clear, always strong in the popular mind, was National Socialism. The only enemy that answered communism in kind. If you wanted to save Germany from communism, to be sure of doing it, you went to National Socialism. The Nazi slogan in 1932 was, "If you want your country to go Bolshevik, vote communist. If you want to remain free Germans, vote Nazi." The middle parties between the two millstones played no role at all between the two radicalisms. Their adherents were basically the burgher, the bourgeois, the nice people who decide things by parliamentary procedure, and the politically indifferent, and the people who wanted to keep, or at worst, only modify the status quo. I'd like to ask the American burgher, the middle-class man, what would you have done when your country stood so? A dictatorship or destruction by Bolshevism? Bolshevism looked like slavery and death of the soul. It didn't matter if you were in agreement with Nazism. Nazism looked like your only defense. There was your choice. "I would rather neither," I said. "Of course, Herr Professor, you are a bourgeois. I was too once. I was a bank clerk, remember?" Of my 10 friends, only 2, Taylor Schwenke and bill collector Simon, the two Altkampfer, wanted to be Nazi and nothing else. They were both positive, still are, that National Socialism was Germany's, and therefore their own, salvation from communism, which, like the much more sensitive bank clerk, they both called Bolshevism, the death of the soul. Bolshevism came from outside, from the barbarous world that was Russia. Nazism, its enemy, was German. It was their own. They would rather Nazism. Did they know what communism, Bolshevism was? They did not my friends. Except for Herr Kessler, teacher Hildebrandt, and the young Horst Ruprecht, after he entered the university in 1941, they knew Bolshevism as a specter, which, as it took on body in their imaginings, embraced not only the communists but the social democrats, the trade unions, and of course, the Jews, the gypsies, the neighbor next door whose dog had bit them, and his dog, the bundled root of all their past, present, and possible tribulations. Prior to 1930 or 1931, none of my 10 friends, except Taylor Schenke and bill collector Simon, hated any communist he knew. They were few in non-industrial Little Cronenberg, or identified him with the specter. These were flesh-and-blood neighbors, who would not break into your house and burn it down. After 1934, 33 or 34, these same neighbors were seen for what they were, innocently disguised lackeys of the specter. The Bolshevist specter outraged the property sense of all but my propertyless friends, the class sense of these declassed burgher, the political sense of these helpless subjects of the former emperor, the religious sense of these pro forma churchgoers, the moral sense of these exceptional characters. It was the death of the soul. The question was not whether communism threatened the country, as with the continuation of deteriorating conditions it certainly did, or soon would. The question was whether the Germans were convinced that it did, and they were. They were so well convinced, by such means as the Reichstag fire of 1933, that the Nazis were able ultimately to establish anti-communism as a religion, immune from inquiry and defensible by definition of alone. When, in 1937, the Pope attacked the errors of National Socialism, the Nazi government's defense of its policies consisted of a note accusing the Pope of having dealt a dangerous blow to the defense front against the world menace of Bolshevism. Those Germans who would do anything, be anything, join anything to stop Bolshevism had, in the end, to be Nazis. And Nazism did stop Bolshevism. How it stopped Bolshevism, with what means and what consequences, did not matter, at least not enough to alienate them. None of its shortcomings, mild or hideous, none of its contradictions, small or calamitous, ever swayed them. To them, then and now, Nazism kept its promise. 3 of my 10 friends, the bank clerk, Kessler, the salesman, Dam, and the tailor's apprentice, Herr Schenke's son, Gustav, were unemployed when they joined, and the first 2 were family men in middle life at the time. In all 3 cases, they joined, I think, because they were unemployed, which is not the least to say that they would not have joined if they hadn't been. The 2 old fighters, Taylor Schenke and bill collector Simon, when they joined in 1925, were both employed. The tailor self-employed. But the inflation which had just ended had reduced them, and nearly all other petite bourgeois Germans to near starvation. Willy Hofmeister, the old policeman, joined the party in 1937 because the new police chief said that all the men must join. When I asked him if he could have refused, he said, "A millionaire I was not." The Sicherheitspolizei, or detective force, one of whose 5 members he was in Cronenberg, was subsequently attached willy-nilly to the Gestapo, just as the volunteer fire department was placed under the SS. Horstmar Ruprecht, the student, had been a Nazi since he was 8 years old, in the Jungvolk, the cub organization of the Hitler Youth. His ambition, which he realized, was to be a Hitler Youth leader. In America, he would certainly have been a scoutmaster. The 2 most active churchmen of the 10, Herr Klingelhofer, the cabinet maker, and Herr Wedekind, the baker, both of them vestrymen of their parish church, were the 2 who today, and I think yesterday, put the most emphasis on the everybody was doing it theme. They were both March Violets. The fact that they were, of the 10, the 2 retail tradesmen doubtless contributed to their sensitivity to this urge to go along. Mitchwomen was the term each of them used, with the party as they had with the church. The cabinet maker freely admitted that his church activity didn't hurt his coffin making, although neither he nor I would say he was a churchman because it was good business to be one. Neither Klingelhofer nor Wedekind read the party program, the historic 25 points, before they joined, while they were members or afterward. Only the teacher of the 10 had ever read it. But they were earnestly impressed, as were most ardent churchgoers in the early years of the movement, by the program's demand, of which every one of my friends had heard, for positive Christianity for Germany. The baker left the vestry board in 1937 when the church party struggle had become intense. He says he left voluntarily as a good Nazi because he felt that his party loyalty compromised his position on the board. His pastor confirms his assertion, but he did not leave the church. Herr Klingelhofer, I always joined everything, remained a vestryman to the end. All 10 of my friends, including the sophisticated Hildebrandt, were affected by the sense of what the Germans call Bewegung, movement, a swelling of the human sea, something super-party and super-political, a surge of the sort that does not at the time evoke analysis or afterward yield to it. These men were victims of the Bolshevik rabies, to be sure. They were equally victims of economic hardship and, still worse, of economic hopelessness, a hopelessness that suffered more easily by identifying it with their countries. But they were seekers too, and affirmers, agents, not just patients. Their country was torn to pieces from without, of course, but still more cruelly from within. Germans had been at one another's throats since 1918, and dissension grew shriller and more bitter all the time. In the course of the decomposition, the principle of being German, so newly won under Bismarck, and so preciously held for fear of its slipping away, was indeed being lost. The uniting of the country, of all its people, was possible only on this one principle of being German, and my 10 friends, even including the old fanatic Schwenke, onlookers at the disruptive struggles of the old parties and the old party politicians, the process of shredding the mystical fabric which supported this principle, asked, "Where is Germany?" Nazism, Hitler rather, knew this, and knew that nothing else mattered to my friends so much as this, the identification of this Germany, the community again, in which one might know he belonged, and belonging identify himself. This was the movement which any non-German might see at once for what it was, and this was a movement which restored my friends as the sight of home restores the lost child, or as the sight of the Lorelei maiden seen sitting high above the Rhine, combing her golden hair with a golden comb, in the surprising late sunshine, bewitches the sailor who overlooks the rocks beneath the river. National Socialism was a revulsion by my friends against parliamentary politics, parliamentary debate, parliamentary government, against all the higgling and the haggling of the parties and the splinter parties, their coalitions, their confusions, and their conniving. It was the final fruit of the common man's repudiation of the rascals. Its motif was throw them all out. My friends in the 1920s were like spectators at a wrestling match, who suspect that beneath all the grunts and the groans, the struggle and the sweat, the match is fixed, that the performers are only pretending to put on a fight. The scandals that rocked the country as one party or cabal exposed another, dismayed and then disgusted my friends. One sensed some of this reaction against the celebrated Army McCarthy hearing in the United States in 1954, not against one side or another, but against the whole thing as disgusting or disgraceful. While the ship of the German state was being shivered, the officers, who alone had life preservers, disputed their prerogatives on the bridge. My friends observed that none of the non-communist, non-Nazi leaders objected to the 35,000 Reichsmark salaries of the cabinet ministers. Only the communists and the Nazis objected. And the bitterest single disappointment of Nazism, both to Simon, the insensitive bill collector, and to Hofmeister, the sensitive policeman, was the fact that Hitler had promised that no official would get more than 1,000 Reichsmarks a month, and did not keep his promise. My friends wanted Germany purified. They wanted it purified of the politicians, of all the politicians. They wanted a representative leader in place of an unrepresentative representatives. And Hitler, the pure man, the anti-politician, was the man untainted by politics, which was only a cloak for corruption. The mink coat scandal in the United States at the beginning of the 1950s had its counterpart in Berlin at the beginning of the 1930s, when the Nazis focused their campaign for the mayoralty on the receipt of the wife of the Social Democratic mayor of a fur coat from a man who did business with the city. Against the whole pack, the whole caboodle, the whole business, against all the parliamentary politicians and all the parliamentary parties. My friends evoked Hitlerism, and Hitlerism overthrew them all. The power struggle within the National Socialist Party, which culminated in the Rome Purge of June 30th, 1934, was in essence parliamentary and political, but my friends never knew it. They accepted it as a cleanup of moral degenerates, and if they caught a glimpse of the reality underneath the official propaganda, their nascent concern was dissipated by the fact that the Führer acted with an instant and terrible sword, and the debate with Rome was finished. The Führer held the country and the countrymen together. This was the Bewegung, the movement that restored my friends and bewitched them. Those Germans who saw it all at the beginning, there were not very many. There never are, I suppose. Called Hitler the Ratfanger, rat catcher. Every American child has read the Pied Piper of Hamelin. Every German child has read it too. In German, its title is Der Ratfanger von Hamelin.